Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into a topic that's pretty important, especially if you're running a small or medium business, in the medical field or health or life sciences. It's the new HIPAA security rule for 2024.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a hot topic right now, and for good reason.
Absolutely. It's not just about checking those boxes anymore. It's really about aligning with all of the modern cybersecurity frameworks, things like NIST CSF to try to, actually prevent those data breaches from happening. I mean, especially when you think back to all those breaches in 2023, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, those numbers were pretty alarming for sure. I mean, 747 large breaches, exposing like 168 million records.
That's a lot of data.
It's a lot. It definitely highlights the need to be more proactive and just have a more robust way of approaching cybersecurity.
I think you're right. And then that's kind of where these high-pod changes come in, right? I mean, they might seem a little daunting at first, especially for smaller businesses, but uh, our goal today is to break down exactly what those adjustments are going to mean, for your cybersecurity, controls, policies, procedures. We're going to try to keep it pretty straightforward, not get too lost in the technical weeds.
Yeah, think of us as your, guides through this new HIPAA world.
Exactly. So let's just jump right in. One of the, I think, biggest changes is they're getting rid of those addressable implementation specifications.
Yeah.
You remember those, where some of those security measures were kind of optional? Well, they're not optional anymore.
No, not anymore. Those days are over. That's
Yeah.
right. No more, do we do this? Do we not do this? Key safeguards like multi-factor authentication, encryption, those are mandatory now. It doesn't matter how big or small you are, you have to have them.
So, I mean, imagine this. Let's say you have a small clinic, 50 employees, right? They now have to meet those same encryption and access controls as, a giant hospital system. That's a huge shift.
It is, but it makes sense, if you think about it. It's a direct response to how the threats are evolving, right? Cyber criminals, they're getting smarter, they're targeting those smaller healthcare places. Because they think, oh, they probably don't have as much money to spend on security. Ransomware, just as an example, targets 60% of all healthcare organizations right now.
Wow, that's wild.
It is pretty wild.
So it sounds like they're trying to, level the playing field, I guess, when it comes to those security requirements.
Yeah, you got it. And that's good. Ultimately, we want to make sure that patient data is protected.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So let's talk about GRC. Governance, risk management, and compliance. That's another area where things are being overhauled under these rules.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So periodic risk assessments, just doing those once in a while, that's not going to cut it anymore. The new IPA security rule, it emphasizes continuous monitoring and management.
So it's not just like taking a quick look once a year at your security.
Right.
You have to constantly be assessing, and adapting to all these threats.
Exactly. And that includes keeping an eye on your vendors, your business associates. They can often be kind of the weakest link in the chain, right?
Yeah.
Because remember, 34% of all breaches, they actually start with those third-party relationships.
Yeah, so it sounds like choosing the right partners and making sure that the security practices are really good is more important now than ever before.
You got it. And you can't just choose the right partner and hope for the best, right?
Yeah.
You need to have those very clear policies, procedures in place for managing the relationships,
Yeah.
ongoing monitoring, making sure that you're keeping tabs on their security.
Right. So these HIPAA changes, it's pretty clear that they're pushing organizations to be way more proactive, more vigilant when it comes to their cybersecurity. But with all of these requirements, it's probably pretty overwhelming to even figure out where to begin, especially for a smaller business with, limited resources. So let's maybe shift gears a bit and talk about how a smaller business could tackle these changes in a manageable way.
Sure. I think a phased approach can be really helpful here because it allows an organization to kind of, prioritize, implement those changes strategically over time.
Okay, so like a roadmap to compliance, sort of. I like that. What would those phases look like?
Okay, so think about that initial phase, like let's say the first, 0 to 6 months, right? You want to focus on getting the foundational elements in place. So that would mean like conducting a very thorough gap analysis, see where you are now and where you need to be to meet those high power requirements.
So like figure out, okay, where are my weak spots? What needs to change?
Exactly. And then implementing multi-factor authentication everywhere, for all access points to electronic PHI.
Yeah, that extra layer of security can make a huge difference.
Oh, for sure. And then, of course, putting encryption in place, like enterprise-wide encryption, that should be a top priority because it makes sure that even if someone does get into your data, they can't read it without the key.
Right, yeah. Securing the data itself is really the most important thing.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so what about after that initial phase? What comes next, maybe 6 to 12 months down the line?
So then you start building on that foundation. You want to get more, granular. So developing a really comprehensive asset inventory. That's key, right? You need to know exactly what devices you have, what systems are on your network, and where your PHI is stored.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty big job, actually.
It can be, but thankfully there are some tools that can kind of you know, automate the process, help with that discovery. So once you have a picture of all your assets, you can start thinking about, network segmentation. So you're dividing your network into these smaller, more isolated segments. So if there is a breach, it can't spread everywhere.
Oh, so you're kind of creating these zones within the network, right, to kind of limit how much damage an attacker can do if they do get in.
Exactly. And then finally, in that 6 to 12-month phase, you're going to want to set up a regular penetration testing program.
What is that?
So you get ethical hackers basically to try and break into your system. The idea is to find any vulnerabilities before, the bad guys do.
Oh, so it's like a controlled attack to help you find those weak spots and fix them.
Exactly. It's a really good way to kind of stay ahead of the game and make sure that your security is actually working.
So we've covered the first year. What about, the final stretch? What about 12 to 18 months? What should they be focusing on then?
So, in that final phase, it's really all about fine-tuning and automating those security and compliance processes. So integrating a GRC platform, with all of your security tools, that can be huge.
Now, you've mentioned GRC a couple of times. Can you maybe break that down a bit? What is a GRC platform exactly, and how would it help a small business?
Okay, so a GRC platform is basically like a system, a centralized system for managing all the things, governance, risk, compliance. And it helps to automate a lot of the tasks. You can track your progress, generate reports, and it makes sure you're meeting all the requirements.
So it's like a command center for your high bay compliance, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of brings everything together.
Yeah.
From risk assessments to policies, incident response, reporting, all that stuff. It really helps to improve efficiency, make sure that everything's aligned.
That's really important, especially for a small business with limited staff and resources.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it frees up your team so they can focus on, the bigger picture stuff rather than getting bogged down with all the manual processes.
Right. Okay. So that last phase, integrating that GRC platform, that's a big step. What else should they be thinking about?
So automating those vendor risk assessments as much as possible, that's really important. It's all about continuous monitoring, keeping an eye on those third-party relationships. You need to make sure those partners are holding up their end of the bargain when it comes to security.
Right. And of course, fine-tuning your continuous monitoring solutions, being able to see what's happening in real time and being able to react quickly if something does go wrong.
Exactly. It's all about having that 24/7 visibility, being able to act quickly when you need to.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here. It sounds like the theme is making sure that compliance is manageable, right? Even for the smaller businesses with limited resources.
You got it. And there are actually a lot of strategies that, small and medium businesses can use to optimize costs without sacrificing security.
I'm sure our listeners are probably really interested in that.
Yeah.
What are some examples of those strategies? Because, you don't want to break the bank trying to do all of this.
Absolutely. So one strategy is what's called compliance as a service. Basically, you're outsourcing some of your compliance program to a specialized provider.
Oh, so it's kind of like having a virtual compliance team.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of these providers, they're pretty flexible. They have these subscription-based models, which can be way more affordable than, hiring a full-time staff just for compliance.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What are some other strategies that they could use?
Well, partnering with a what's called a managed security service provider or MSP, to do things like vulnerability scanning, patching, security monitoring, that can also be a good way to, leverage some external expertise without having to build it all yourself.
Right, you're basically bringing in this team of cybersecurity pros, but in a much more cost-effective way.
You got it. And don't underestimate the power of automation, right? There are tools out there that can generate, like, audit-ready reports straight from your security tools. That saves you tons of time.
Yeah, especially for smaller teams who are already really busy.
Oh, for sure. And some of those GRC platforms, they even have automation built right in. So things like policy creation and updates, they can even use AI to streamline that whole process.
Yeah, it's amazing how much technology can simplify all of this.
It really is. And don't forget about collaboration, too. Joining those ISACs, those are information sharing and analysis centers. Healthcare ISACs can be incredibly valuable because they provide a place where everyone can share information about threats, best practices.
It's kind of like having this network of, peers who are all facing the same challenges and can help each other out.
Exactly. And even collaborating with other providers in your area on things like training, that can also be really cost effective.
Yeah, pooling resources, sharing that knowledge, everyone wins. It's about working smarter, not harder. Right. But, I think it's important to remember that cybersecurity is not all about just the technology. Human error, that still plays a huge role in a lot of these breaches, right?
So you're absolutely right. A lot of people don't realize that 58% of breaches, they happen because of something a person did, a mistake someone made.
Wow, that's a big number. So how do we try to address that? How do we reduce the risk of human error? Especially when we're talking about protecting this really sensitive patient information.
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? It's all about creating what's called a culture of security within your organization. It's more than just having the technology, the right policies. It's about changing the way people think, making security everyone's job.
That sounds like a big change. How do you even start to do that?
Well, leadership has to set the tone. They need to make it very clear from the top down that cybersecurity is a priority for everyone.
So it's not just the IT department's problem.
Exactly. It's everybody's problem. And leadership, they need to be the ones, walking the walk. They need to be involved in those security initiatives, follow the rules, and just champion that security first mindset.
I see, yeah. So if the employees see their bosses taking it seriously, then they're more likely to as well.
Exactly. And you have to give them the tools to do it, right? They need the knowledge, the resources to make smart decisions. You want them to feel empowered to speak up if they see something that looks fishy, right? You have to create that kind of environment where they feel comfortable asking questions, reporting potential problems.
So it's about making it okay to talk about these things, not be afraid to ask for help.
You got it. And training is really important, too. You have to provide engaging and relevant training, not just those boring once-a-year PowerPoint presentations.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody likes those.
No, nobody does. You want to make it more interactive, use real-world examples, simulations, maybe even some gamification to make it more fun.
Right. Make it interesting, make it memorable.
Right. You want people to actually pay attention and learn something.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about that initial training. It's about staying on top of it, sending those regular reminders, like newsletters, emails, even posters to keep security top of mind. Talk about current threats, phishing scams, all that stuff.
Yeah, so it's about, constantly reminding people that it's important.
Exactly. And don't forget to reward people for doing the right thing. You want to celebrate those wins, acknowledge the employees who are really going above and beyond to promote those good security practices. You want to create an environment where security is valued.
It's amazing what a little positive reinforcement can do.
Oh, yeah. It goes a long way. And at the end of the day, remember, building this kind of culture, it's a journey. It takes time, effort. You got to keep reinforcing it.
Yeah, you can't just do it once and expect everything to be fixed.
Exactly. But if you can do it, if you can create this strong security culture, it's going to pay off big time. You're going to protect that patient data. You're going to protect your reputation, and you might even gain a competitive advantage.
It's really about doing the right thing, right? For your patients, for your employees, for your organization as a whole.
You said it perfectly. And, it's important to remember that these 2024 IPO changes, while they are challenging, they also represent an opportunity for small and medium businesses to really improve their security.
Yeah, it's like turning a burden into an advantage.
Exactly. Organizations that take this seriously, they modernize their programs, they embrace these new requirements, they're going to be in a much better position, right? They're going to reduce their risks, they're going to improve their efficiency, and they're going to be more competitive. And that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, it's an investment that pays off in a lot of different ways.
That's right.
So as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, I just want to leave our listeners with a thought. Remember that small clinic we talked about? the one that managed to get 92% of their staff compliant in just 6 months. They did it by using things like, short training videos and a compliance champion award. If they can do it, anyone can do it. It's all about finding what works for you, for your people.
Exactly. There's no magic formula, But with the right attitude, the right tools, and the right support, any organization can achieve HIPAA compliance and build a solid security foundation.
We'll be back in just a moment to continue exploring these HIPAA changes and how you can navigate them effectively. Stay tuned.
And another thing that can be really helpful is thinking about partnerships with, like, academic cybersecurity programs.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. How would that kind of partnership benefit, a smaller business?
Well, those programs, they're always doing the latest research, right? So you're kind of getting access to that cutting edge stuff. Plus, they usually have a bunch of students who are really eager to get some real world experience. So it could be a great way to get some help with projects or even internships.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's a win-win, right? You get those fresh perspectives, maybe an extra set of hands to help out, and the students get that practical experience.
Exactly. And sometimes, those partnerships can even turn into full-time jobs. So it's a good way to maybe find some new talent, too.
That's a great point. You're not just thinking about the here and now, you're thinking long-term, too.
Absolutely. And, speaking of the future, we've been talking a lot about what's happening right now with these 2024 IPAA changes, but it's important to remember that this whole cybersecurity thing, it's constantly changing, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like trying to hit a moving target.
It really is. So it's super important for those small and medium businesses, especially in healthcare, to be proactive. Think ahead, Be ready for what's coming next.
So what's on the horizon? What are some of those emerging trends that we need to be aware of?
Okay, so one thing that's getting a lot of attention is this whole idea of AI governance. Artificial intelligence is becoming more and more common in healthcare,
Yeah.
especially with those machine learning models that analyze patient data.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that those AI systems are being used in a safe and responsible way, that they're following all the HIPAA rules.
So making sure that the algorithms themselves are protecting privacy, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And you need to have everything documented, clear processes for how those models are built, trained, and used.
That makes sense. I mean, AI is such a powerful tool, but you have to be careful with it.
For sure. Another thing that's becoming more important is SBOM adoption.
SBOM, what's that?
It stands for Software Bill of Materials. It's kind of like a nutrition label for your software.
A nutrition label for software? Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah. You know how you want to know what ingredients are in your food, right? Well, an SBOM tells you exactly what's in your software. All the different components, libraries, everything. It's really important for finding vulnerabilities and making sure that your software is up to date.
Oh, I see. So it's about knowing what's inside that software and making sure there are no hidden surprises.
Exactly. You don't want to accidentally install something that's going to create a security risk.
Right, right. And I've also heard a lot of talk lately about zero trust architecture. Is that something we need to be thinking about?
Oh, absolutely. That's kind of the gold standard these days when it comes to cybersecurity.
Okay. So tell me, what is it? How does it work?
So the basic idea is pretty simple. Never trust, always verify. Instead of assuming that everything inside your network is safe, you treat everything as potentially dangerous, Every device, every user, every connection.
So you're basically getting rid of that idea of a trusted zone and double-checking everything.
Exactly. It's a big change from how security used to be done. You used to build this big wall around your network and assume that everything inside was safe. But with zero trust, you're putting security checks everywhere.
I see. So it's like having those checkpoints at every door and window.
Yeah.
Makes it a lot harder to sneak in.
You got it. And yeah, I know implementing zero trust can be a little tricky. It might require you to change some things in your infrastructure, but it's the way of the future, for sure.
So it's something that we should start planning for now, even if we're not quite ready to make the jump just yet.
Absolutely. The sooner you start thinking about it, the better.
This is all really interesting, but I want to make sure we leave our listeners with some practical advice. What's one thing they can do right now to improve their security?
One thing I always recommend is doing tabletop exercises.
Tabletop exercises. What are those?
Basically, you get your team together and you run through different cyber attack scenarios. What would you do if you got hit with ransomware? What if there was a data breach? It's a great way to test your plans and see if they actually work.
Oh, so it's like a fire drill, but for your cybersecurity team.
Exactly. It helps you find those weak spots and fix them before something bad happens.
That's a really good idea.
And another important thing is to make sure you have some money set aside specifically for security upgrades. Things change so fast in this field, you need to be able to adapt.
So it's not just about meeting the current requirements, it's about being ready for whatever comes next.
You got it. Security is an investment, not just an expense.
This is all really great information, but I think we need to give our listeners a moment to digest everything we've talked about. We'll be back in a few minutes to finish our deep dive into the 2024 HIPAA security rule changes. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. As we wrap up our deep dive into these HIPAA changes, I keep thinking back to that 58% statistic, all those breaches that happen because of human error.
It really does make you think, doesn't it? Like, you can have all the fancy technology in the world, but if people aren't careful, it's all for nothing.
Exactly. So how do we fix that? How do we create that environment where everyone's on board with security, where they feel responsible for protecting that information?
Well, it's a big challenge for sure, but I think it all starts with changing the way we think about security. It can't just be an IT problem. It has to be everyone's responsibility.
Yeah, it's got to be part of the culture, right? Not just something you check off a list.
Exactly. And it has to start at the top. Leadership, they have to set the example. They need to be the ones pushing for security training, following the rules themselves.
Right, they have to walk the walk, basically.
Yeah.
Actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely. And they have to empower their employees, too. Give them the information they need, the tools they need to make good decisions. Encourage them to speak up if they see something that looks suspicious. Create a safe space for them to ask questions.
Yeah, making clear that it's okay to make mistakes, as long as you learn from them.
Right. And the training has to be good, too. You can't just throw a bunch of boring PowerPoints at people and expect them to remember it.
Yeah, nobody wants to sit through those.
You got to make it interactive, Use real-life examples, maybe even some games to make it fun.
Keep it interesting.
Exactly. And you have to keep reminding people, too. Send out regular updates, maybe some tips on how to create a strong password or about a phishing email.
Just keep security top of mind.
Exactly. And don't forget to reward people for doing the right thing, too. Celebrate those security wins. Give people a shout out for going above and beyond.
A little appreciation goes a long way, that's for sure.
It really does. And, at the end of the day, building this kind of culture, it's a journey. It takes time. It takes effort, and you have to keep at it.
Yeah, it's not a one-time fix.
But it's so worth it. When you have that strong security culture in place, you're protecting your patients, you're protecting your reputation, and you're setting yourself up for success.
Absolutely. It's about doing the right thing for everyone involved.
Exactly.
Well, as we wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave everyone with one final thought. Remember that clinic we talked about earlier? The one that achieved 92% staff compliance in just 6 months. They did it, and you can too.
That's right. There's no magic formula, but if you're willing to put in the effort, you can build a really strong security foundation.
So true. We hope you found this conversation helpful. We're here to support you on your journey to cybersecurity excellence.
Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions.
Until next time, stay safe and stay secure.